Everybody doing okay? Oh, do I need to? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Welcome to our April OWASP Boston chapter meeting. Sponsors for today: the food sponsor is paid for by our LastCon conference, and facilities, National Instruments. Our chapter leadership, I'm Tiana Chandler, the chapter leader. We also have some other folks in the room who are also on our board. If you could raise your hands. And if you have any questions about the our conference, our chapter and the, yeah, we'll talk about conference as well, but later. But so if you have any questions about our chapter, just please reach out to us, and we'd be happy to talk to you more about it. If you're interested in any CPEs for this meeting, then if you would just email me and I can send you a certificate for that. It's eligible for 1 credit hour. If you're looking to support our OWASP chapter, just note that you do not have to be an OWASP member to attend these meetings or even to utilize any of the documentation and other things on the OWASP website, but it does help us to achieve our goals and to provide things to the community. So first of all, there's volunteer opportunities if you would either like to get more involved with the leadership, speaker opportunities such as speaking at one of these chapter meetings, or even any other local events we may have. If you do shop on Amazon, which probably most people have at least bought something from there, there is the Amazon Smile program, and if you do select that when you make your purchase, part of that goes to OWASP. And we are also a 501c3 organization. As mentioned before about OWASP membership, there are different levels of membership, either individual corporate memberships and as well as student memberships if you're a student. You can find more on that at the OWASP.org, and you can find our OWASP, our Austin page, and then get more information from that. Also, our membership coordinator is Paul Griffiths. And Griff, did you want to say anything, or? Thank you, Griff. We also have a weekly study group that's going on right now. Currently, it's on attacking network protocols. The study groups usually we take a book and then go through that each week. Matt Pardo, is Matt here today? No. He is our education coordinator, and so you can reach out to him for more information on that. And I believe they're getting, I don't know if we're getting close to getting that completed. But if you, we have a Slack channel that has discussions on the book and the progress of that. Now about LastCon, the conference. It will be October 25th and 26th of this year for the conference dates. We're still looking at the offering training the 2 days before. That's still being discussed. We have early bird tickets still available until the end of this month. And also the call for presentations is open at this time. And if you go to lastcon.org, you can find out more information on that. And Banka, did you want to say anything about LastCon?
I'm Duncan. I'm the coordinator for the conference this year. One other thing that we are looking for LastCon I see a lot of new faces, and we need some new faces on our coordinating team and volunteering team to organize and arrange the conference. So if any of you are interested in wanting to learn more about OWASP, get involved in the community, and also get to attend the conference for free, as well as some other perks, please see me after the meeting.
Thank you, Becky. Upcoming chapter events, we are working with Matt Pardo. We have some discussions on doing some additional OWASP some training. So just stay tuned on that. Also, the Austin Security Professionals Happy Hour, which is, we co-coordinate with ISSA. That next one should be on May 10th at Baby Acapulco's on Stone Lake Boulevard. And if you're on our mailing list, I will be posting out more information about that, as well as putting it up on our OWASP wiki page. Other local events, just have them listed here. Actually, ISA has a good calendar on most of all this things that are going on. So I just wanted to have these listed. And then, is there anybody here that wants to speak more about these events or any other events that may have coming up? Okay. At this point, I'd like to take the time to ask if there's anybody that is either has job openings or is looking for a job.
Okay. My name is Richard Boyd. For the last 20 years or so, I've been working in Europe, providing network support, primarily network design to the U.S. military. I now have also a master's degree in cybersecurity, and I am also a CISSP member. Security side, as well as my network design background. I'm also prior service as a military intelligence analyst, so positions of security positions in intel analyst. I'm also interested in that sort of positions. So if anybody has a position in that fits within that, please let me know, and I'll get business cards for you. Because I'm ready to go back to work.
Sounds great.
Hi, my name is Robert Price. I've been into network security since I was in school. That was about 2 years ago. I graduated from college with a degree in computer science. I've done things with password hash cracking, network administration, using things like intrusion prevention systems and intrusion detection systems. I've worked with breaking random number generators, penetration testing, Wi-Fi password cracking, packet sniffing, things like that. Some vulnerability research. I've used tools like GDB to break into or to reverse engineer shell code and things like that. I'm mainly looking for right now I'm considering getting a job in system architecture or getting certified in something related to Amazon Web Services. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Anybody else?
Hello, my name is Brig Brednick. I'm the engineering manager at SailPoint Technologies, and we have recently opened up a role for a lead security engineer for our cloud-based product, Identity Now. It'll be one where you're working with our architects and leads just to ensure better and more secure coding practices.
Thank you. Okay. So now we'd like to present Brian McIntosh. I probably should have asked you beforehand. Did I say that? Yes. And talking about CloudJacking. Thank you.
Get on the web. Oh man, it's not showing up, is it? Any idea how to get that full screen? Oh, thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And this mic is hot. Check. Y'all hear me? Good. Good? Good. All right.
Thanks for having me today. I drove in from Dallas yesterday and see some familiar faces. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to come down and talk to you guys. Today I'm going to be talking about CloudJacking. It's not trademarked. I have this pet peeve with the commercialization of vulnerabilities, so hence the trademark symbol. Anyway, today we're going to be talking about exploiting AWS Route 53, CloudFront, and add some new content with regards to S3 bucket hijacking as well. So just by show of hands, how many of you are familiar with cloud technologies, just in general, and AWS specifically? Okay, cool, right on. Good deal. So today's agenda. So who am I? What's subdomain hijacking, the topic of the talk? I'm going to talk a little bit about the managed services that AWS provides us. How can we exploit those services? There is a live demo. Because of the S3 bucket addition that I'm incorporating into this talk, I think we might experience a little bit of a demo god vengeance, so bear with me. We can see if we can work through that. And then why the lame PowerPoint template? They gave this talk at Dallas Hackers Association a few months back, and they had I think a speaker cancel on them, and I threw this deck together in like 3 hours. So I didn't have time to change it once again, so just stuck with the same template. So who am I? Again, Brian McAninch, however you prefer to pronounce it. My handle is Afex. You can find me on Twitter at Brian McAninch, creatively named Twitter handle. And my LinkedIn profile is up there. I'm the founder and executive director of Pervade Cybersecurity. We also have a Twitter handle up there if you'd like to follow us. My current area of research that I'm focusing on is primarily cloud, containerization, FAS technology, or serverless, aka Lambda. And actually gave a really good talk on that at D-Sides DFW. And if any of you are going to Circle CityCon the weekend of June 2nd, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in Indianapolis, I'll be giving that presentation there as well. So what is subdomain hijacking? Is anyone familiar with the topic? Yes, just a couple? Okay, good. So we're going to have this fictitious company named Acme. They sell explosive bird seed, and if you don't get that reference, you're probably too young. So what Acme decides to do is they go to a hosting service provider, and they choose shop.acme.com for their DNS resolution, for their e-commerce site, to sell the explosive bird seed. They outsource that to someone like Magento, Shopify, YoCart, Illusion. There's several out there, right? When they go in and configure their store URL, the provider is going to give them something ugly like acme.ecommerce.provider.com. But to make it a little bit more aesthetically appealing, better user experience, they will map that through DNS settings and whatnot to something like shop.acme.com. And for seamless integration, they'll do some 301, 302 HTTP redirects to make that a little bit more seamless and transparent. But again, it's primarily done through like DNS CNAME records. So this is fictitious, but just to kind of give you an example of if we were to look up shop.acme.com, this might be what it looks like. Point to note here is this is currently Acme controlled, 12.34 to 56.78. Excuse me, I'm battling allergies here in Austin. So Acme brings their product to market, realizes explosive birdseed was a bad idea. Who knew, right? So they canceled their service provider subscription. But here's the important point. They don't delete the CNAME in their DNS records. So that CNAME is still pointing to the service provider. What an attacker can do in a traditional sense, this is not a cloud environment yet, they can create their own account at that same service provider. They can register that same unaesthetic URL, if you will, acme.ecommerce.provider.com, and now because the Acme CNAME still points to that, now the attacker can control all the content that's served up through shop.acme.com. So you can kind of see where this is going. So pretty much same thing. The only difference is now that's attacker controlled. And this is assuming the IP and whatnot doesn't change, just for simplicity. You might be wondering, who is this affected? I'm sure there's more since I've put these up, but you got Greenhouse, Slack, Snapchat, Twitter, a bunch of people have been hit. This is becoming more pervasive as the rate of adoption with cloud and whatnot increases, right? So Route 53, CloudFront, and S3, what are they? So Route 53 is a managed DNS service. You can completely delegate your entire Apex, meaning your top level acme.com, over to Route 53, or what we're going to be talking about today is delegating your subdomain sort of authority over to them and controlling subdomains through it. Some of the features: it's scalable, distributed, highly resilient. It's got traffic routing policies that you can say, if you're in Europe, send them to these servers. If you're in Asia, North America, send them to these. Really, really highly configurable. Pretty neat service they provide. CloudFront is another AWS managed service. It's a content distribution or delivery. Distribution network? Delivery? Yeah, I always forget that. It's a AWS managed CDN service. And what they attempt to do and do very well is push that content out to what they call the edge network. So when there's a request for that content, the latency is minimized, better user experience, page load time, et cetera, et cetera. And they have again a very vast network of these edge locations throughout global data centers. S3, everyone I'm sure at this point knows what S3 is because of its reputation. It's garnered over the last year or two with world readable S3 buckets. It's just it's an object storage managed service from AWS, and by object, anything can go in. It's just very generic. Just like most other AWS services, highly scalable, very fast. It's inexpensive. It's got different pricing tiers if you want to, certain amount of redundancy and whatnot. Spend more if you want more redundancy, but even like the lowest tier is like 98%. So that would be that one. If anyone has any questions, feel free to stop me. I'm happy to answer as we go along. So for Route 53, with regards to what we're talking about today, uses alias records. So it's similar to an A record, but with CNAME functionality. So it's visible as an alias only through the Route 53 console or an AWS API. When you attempt to resolve it publicly, it resolves as an A record. So we'll get into that here in a bit. Route 53 also has what it calls resource targets, and it's basically what you want to serve up to the client when that particular IP and hostname are queried. So some of the options currently are Elastic Beanstalk. You have the application and Elastic Load Balancer, ALB, ELB. S3, you can point it to another Route 53 record if you want, and CloudFront, and that's what we're going to talk about today. CloudFront features. So confusingly enough, you have CNAMEs that you can have in Route 53, and the alias that points to CNAMEs in CloudFront. And what the CNAMEs are is they're very similar to virtual hosts like on Nginx or Apache or IIS, what have you, whatever platform you're using. So when a client queries for a specific IP and they have a host header field and it says, I want to talk to www or www1, www2, the server will then retrieve that content and serve it to the client. And the reason they incorporated this is because the CloudFront distribution domain names, I don't know if you can, kind of tiny print there, but one of the examples in this case was that CloudFront assigned was d22kkejurvirtnq.cloudfront.net. It's pretty nasty. So you'll see some similarities to what we started off with the Acme example. They had, what was it, shop.acme.provider.com. This is just a little little less aesthetic, even more. The interesting thing to note about this is it has global namespaces, meaning if I register or configure a CloudFront distribution with a particular CNAME, acme.com, that is global throughout the entire CloudFront environment. So if I do it, for instance, maybe getting ahead of myself, but this opens the door for some type of DNS squatting, right? You can do type squatting, you do all kinds of different squatting attacks with this. So it supports Apex and subdomain wildcards, which opens the door for a lot of opportunities, really increases the attack surface on it. And there's no one-to-one mapping between the distribution that you've configured and the actual content origin that it points to. And in this case, we'll cover today is an S3 bucket with some static content that we're going to serve up. Content origins, similar to Route 53, we can point to S3 ELB, supports web and real-time messaging protocol distributions. And it has an interesting security feature called Origin Access Identity. So if we're hosting static content in an S3 bucket, we don't want people accessing that S3 bucket directly, we can configure CloudFront and S3 to say you can only access that content if it's via CloudFront. So you have to hit CloudFront first, and then the S3, you can't access the bucket directly. So pretty neat security controls you can implement on that. And then S3, again, it's primarily comprised of objects and buckets. And objects really are just data and metadata, generic file types. And then the buckets is just a logical storage unit. It's folders. I mean, who are we kidding? It's folders. Both support access control lists with pretty granular access controls. Unfortunately, that's kind of a double-edged sword, as we've seen with S3. A lot of people are like, you know what, I don't even want to mess with it. World readable, and I'm done. It works. But we've also seen the consequences of that as well. You can also implement identity and access management policies through AWS, which is a even more fine-grained way to control that. But again, that has even more complexities because now you're dealing with users and roles and policies. But in AWS's defense, they do give you all the means necessary to lock down the environment. But again, there's a cost associated with that in terms of configuration and managing it. And that is why the vulnerabilities we're going to talk about today typically materialize. So data at rest encryption using S3 client certificate. You have S3 server-side encryption and S3 key management service encryption. 3 different ways to encrypt your data at rest in S3. Not really relevant to this, kind of just wanted to mention it because if you're not familiar with it, might be something you want to look at. So we're going to talk here about the CloudFront distribution that I had created. So again, you've got this nasty looking unaesthetic name. We do an NS lookup on that, and it returns these IP addresses. Now again, when we actually look up the CNAME that we're going to configure, it treats it like a HTTP virtual host and just maps that to the content and delivers back to the client. This is just for demonstration purposes, but again, now we're doing dig on test.lab.private.com. Again, the lab.private.com is just my subdomain I've configured in Route 53, in case that wasn't clear. Any questions? Am I talking too fast? Too slow? Okay. So the meat of the matter, how do I exploit this? So there's a couple ways. I'm working on a script that I'll show in a bit, but there's a couple different ways to enumerate whether this exists from a defensive, administrative standpoint, and more of an offensive exploitation standpoint. Really what we're looking for is decoupled CloudFront and S3. So I'll show you here in a minute. When we're setting up our CloudFront distribution, we want to say serve content from this S3 bucket. If that S3 bucket is deleted and the CloudFront distribution is still configured to serve up that content, that opens up the risk of that bucket being hijacked and the distribution serving up an attacker's content. Similar case for Route 53 and CloudFront. So this is kind of a chain here, right? You got Route 53, CloudFront, S3. The only difference is, aside from deleting the CNAMEs in a CloudFront distribution that our Route 53 alias still points to, you can, I'm sorry, I misread this here. You can also squat it, much like the S3 buckets, but I'm sorry, I lost my thought. I was going somewhere and I lost my thought. Moving on. Some of the automated reconnaissance that you can use using things like DNS Recon, DNS Dumpster. I've been tinkering with the Census and Shodan APIs to see if I can enumerate anything with those. Those have been somewhat fruitful. So a reverse lookup error indicates, if you're doing a reverse lookup on a CloudFront distribution, it will indicate one way or another whether the distribution or the CNAME exists. CloudFront error returned from CloudFront directly indicates that the distribution exists, but it's misconfigured. And then you will get a HTTP 404 or 503 indicates that the S3 bucket either exists or doesn't exist, or ACLs are configured that don't allow you. So it's just basically a process of elimination, trial and error. So a couple different things we can do with this exploitation. We can create a replica of the target site content and a replica S3 bucket. We can create a replica S3 bucket and or CloudFront distribution, depending on where that vulnerability may or may not exist. We can create CloudFront CNAMEs matching the target's decoupled Route 53 alias. And again, if this is too much to digest, hopefully the demo guys will be on my side today, but hopefully the demo will make a little more sense with it. Some of the risks, target masquerading, so we can basically front as the legitimate target site. We can have malicious code, could lead to everything from phishing and credential theft to session hijacking, et cetera, reputational, legal, regulatory. Now that we have GDPR coming into effect, there's a lot of risks that could materialize from something like this. So these are my uber elite PowerPoint graphic skills here. So this is a normal setup, if you will. So we've got Route 53. We have an alias configured to point to that D22 yada yada CloudFront.net distribution that we've created. In that CloudFront distribution, we say we want to serve up this content. So we've already configured an S3 bucket with that content and point it to it. In this case, the name of it is www.lab.pervade.com. And then the S3 bucket is the actual origin, which serves up the index.html file. So this is how we would exploit S3. We would see that CloudFront still points to www.lab.pervade.com, but that bucket does not exist. Simply enough, you can go into S3 and start typing in whatever name you want. Again, it's CloudFront and S3 both have global namespaces, so it'll tell you right away if it's unique or not, if you can register it, create the bucket, etc. So basically, what the attacker is doing here is redirecting CloudFront to his own bucket and serving up whatever content they desire. So you can extend that out with this. You see the links of the chain I was mentioning earlier. We've determined that maybe there's a Route 53 alias pointing to a non-existent CloudFront CNAME. We can go create that CNAME. We can create the bucket with the malicious index.html file as well. Does that make sense, everyone? Yes. So the question, if I understood it, was, are you removing the S3 content or the S3 bucket altogether? Correct. So, so I'm going to show here in two different browsers, one incognito and one another. I'm going to log into my personal account and I'm going to log into my company account. And so if I understand your question correctly, in my personal account, what I'm going to attempt to do is create an S3 bucket that is named the same thing that my company account's CloudFront distribution is pointing to. Does that make sense? And so I could put malicious whatever in it, right? Index HTML. It's going to be a very simple demo, but does that answer your question? Okay. Okay, so when you're removing the bucket, that would be on the company side in this role-playing scenario. So my company, I went in and I say, I don't need that bucket anymore. I delete it. But my cloud, it's very easy. It's very easy. As soon as my company were to delete that bucket, anyone, well, I've encountered a little difficulty doing this. It has actually a lag time because it has to go through and delete it and scrub it and everything. So there's a little lag time, but as soon as that, whatever period is, it might be an hour or two, someone else can go register that same bucket name. And because of the way CloudFront maps that and treats that, if their CloudFront distribution is still configured and pointing to that namespace that you now control, you can serve up whatever you want. And the same thing exists here as I'm pointing out for CloudFront, right? And Route 53. It's just kind of a link in the chain. So in this example, you know, in the green box up here, company X, I go in and I say, I'm going to delete the C name for www.acme.com, right? That's pretty much instantaneous in CloudFront. S3, they have to go through and clean it out and whatnot. But as an attacker, once I notice these conditions are met, I can go in and create my own CloudFront distribution, and the company's Route 53 is still pointing to that, even though it's in a completely separate account. Does that make sense? Okay, hopefully it does. Yes. Exactly, yes, right. And that's a good point. I haven't looked at that. I don't know if it has to match the C name because you're telling CloudFront, I think the bucket name could be, you know, ABCXYZ because and all this CloudFront is doing is an internal mapping to that. I don't think the bucket name needs to match the C name. Right, right. What does need to match is the CloudFront C name and the Route 53 alias. That has to match, right? Okay. Anything else? Thanks for the question, by the way. So I like icons and logos, so I threw some up here. Mentioned earlier, other than serving up malicious content, session hijacking, whatnot, we can squat this through open source intelligence gathering. Just simple query on Google, you know, top 10 AWS customers, pull these guys up. I'm not condoning any sort of malicious activity or experimenting, just showing you some very well-known publicly owned companies that use AWS. And this is kind of what we were just talking about was if I just want to go in and squat this and make it difficult for people to register and configure Route 53, CloudFront, S3, I can go in, and again, because the namespace for CloudFront and S3 are both global, I can go in and create those names, and it makes it very, look at an error when they try to register that, and they try to configure it. So that would be for S3, similar thing for CloudFront CNAMEs. Now, I haven't experimented with this enough to have someone come back at me and you know, through legal recourse or AWS or whatnot. I'm sure they could get it back, but it probably would create a hassle. If they contacted AWS and said, hi, I'm, you know, the CISO for Acme.com. We found that this, you know, company XYZ has our CNAMEs or S buckets or S3 buckets already registered and we can't use it for whatever reason. Something you can do. I'm pretty sure AWS would be willing to work with them, but again, I haven't taken it to that level, nor do I intend to. So some of the things that could happen, right? If you've got you're implementing DevOps, DevSecOps, you've got an automated CI/CD pipeline. If something were reconfigured on the back end in the cloud environment and there's dependencies upstream within your pipeline for that, that could be very disruptive. And you may need to go through the steps I just described of contacting AWS and, you know, what sort of recourse do you have in those terms of getting those namespaces back? Is essentially what you're trying to do. So again, haven't gone that route, but I don't encourage anyone to, but I would assume that would be very disruptive to your pipeline. So the question is does it cost to register the domain name? So you'll have your registrar, such as name.com or whatever. That's where you would register it. You could also do that with AWS for domain.com. What I've done is I have mine in a separate registrar, and I delegate out the subdomain to AWS Route 53. So within Route 53, they charge you for on a query basis, but it's like it's a lot. I mean, I don't have enough queries to even be charged for it. So they do charge you, but you'd have to have a pretty high volume of queries to actually see any sort of noticeable charges being incurred. Does that answer your question? Yeah, sorry. No, you can configure you can do it through S3, correct? But you can also do it just through the web console. Is there something I can elaborate on?
I know you can access from a web console, but underlying is still using. Once you log in, you get some token in order to access. Now I'm thinking of between CloudFront and S3. Doesn't CloudFront need some credential to access S3 bucket? And if you changing to a different bucket, that different your bucket, unless you manually set it up so it doesn't require any credential to access. By default, would require credential to access.
We can walk through it in a demo, and feel free to point out if there is something, but I don't recall having any sort of ACLs preventing you from doing that. You can go in and do it, I imagine, with bucket and object ACLs and IAM policies, but typically.
So what you're saying by default is no control?
Not from what I've seen, no. And again, because this is a CloudFront distribution serving up presumably content to the public internet, the bucket has to be world readable. So
okay, thank you.
It's a little bit of a catch-22, yeah. But feel free to point out if there's something as we walk through the demo. I'd be happy to stop and see if there's something we can do to lock it down more. So getting back, squatting your own S3 buckets and CloudFront CNAMEs. We're talking about what can you do to remediate this. Really, it boils down to good housekeeping, right? If you delete something, make sure there's not any sort of upstream dependencies or downstream. But these global namespaces, I use race condition loosely here, but it's basically who registers it first, right? Who configures a CloudFront distribution or creates an S3 bucket first with whatever the desired name is. So you can kind of, in a squatting sense, anticipate what acme.com might want to register, dev.acme.com or prod.acme.com, store.acme.com. You can kind of, guess what sort of appealing domain name, subdomain they might want to register. There's some trickery I haven't really worked out in terms of what takes priority in these CNAMEs, but it seems to me that wildcards supersede, what's the word, are greater than. The apex are greater than subdomain. So wildcard, as the name would imply, tends to cap everything. And you have the apex, top level domain, that is greater than subdomain. But there seems to be some catches there, such as if the subdomain is registered first, that it will not allow you to create a wildcard in a separate account. If I remember correctly. It's a few months since I've done this one, so. But best thing you can do is go in and fix the decoupling between the CloudFront S3 and Route 53 CloudFront. Delete or modify, again, validate any sort of pipeline dependencies you might have or anything else that you might imagine that would exist. I created a tool with my rudimentary Python skills called CloudJack. It's on GitHub if you want to download it. I just updated it with some cool ASCII art because I didn't really have a lot of cool stuff to add yet. But I would like to add the S3 assessment, if you will, that we talked about. And I ultimately would like to make it more offensive in nature. So right now, you set up your AWS credentials on your AWS credentials file. You config it, assuming you have all the necessary access to query them, the CloudFront Route 53 and S3 metadata. It'll go through and it'll tell you if, right now, it'll tell you if your Route 53 and CloudFront CNAMEs have become decoupled. Again, I want to extend that out to S3 and beyond that, make it a little bit more offensive in nature so we can have pen testers, red teams leverage this. So. Is there a live demo? Yes, there is. Before we do that, there's a list of resources. I assume we can post this online if you guys want to. That's it for the Prezo. So let me see if I can get that to here. Oh, yeah, sorry.
Route 53 is for pointing to other services. Is it also relevant? For example, if you have, I don't know, a EC2 which hosts a web server. Will this?
Good question. So is this only relevant to Route 53 CloudFront S3?
Oh, also a place. Yeah.
That's the question, right?
So apply to others.
CloudFront, okay, so Route 53 has a certain set of what they call resource, what do they call those? I had it earlier on in the slide. They're called, let me click back here. Resource, nope. There we go, resource targets. So those are some of them. They may have added more since I did this deck, but right now, or when I wrote this, it was Elastic, Beanstalk, ALB, ELB, S3. You can point it to another Route 53 record or CloudFront. I'm sorry, say that one more time. Right, and then behind that you would have EC2 instances or ECS cluster or something like that, right? Yeah, you could do that. I haven't tinkered with that yet, only because I think what really piqued my interest was the global namespacing of CloudFront and S3. So that's another possibility, though. So good point. All right, so let's see if these demo gods are going to be in my favor. So. This was with tinkering with the S3 part. As I said, it's kind of a new part of the demo. So what I'm going to attempt to do is, let me put this down quick. Check. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to recreate one that I created in my account, my personal account. So just bear with me. This was what I was talking about earlier about when you have an S3 bucket that you delete, there's a lag, and I haven't determined. It's sometimes been 30 minutes, sometimes it's been 2 hours. So we'll work around it either way. Oh, cool. It looks like the time actually expired. So demo gods are in a favorable mood today. Alrighty, so what we're gonna do is, where did I have that? Let me make sure this is the right file. All right. Oh, sorry, yeah. I can be a little closer to it. Check, check. Check, check. Good, good. Okay. This is what we're going to serve up through our company website. I'm just going to say hello world. I'm going to do that with this HTML file, which for purposes of demonstration, I'm just going to copy this over to another bucket. Should be able to go access this. Cool. Okay, so we've got it's a world readable bucket again because it's got to be accessible from anyone on the internet. So back up here. So we've got the content created. Now we got to go say, hey CloudFront, where are you CloudFront? Hey CloudFront, I need you to serve that up. So setting up a distribution is a little longer than time permits today, but you can go in here and basically see the settings of what I've set up. So you edit this. So you'll notice I've created a CNAME here, and we talked about that, www.lab.purvey.com. Default root object is the index.html file that we created. We can actually do all this over HTTPS if you want. You can use a AWS certificate manager. Gives you a TLS certificate, wildcard certificate, but if you're conducting an attack, it might be a little bit more convincing if you're able to pull that off. You get a nice little green icon in the bar. So the point I want to make here was, okay, so we've got this configured. I'm just going to cancel out of that. And then we were talking about origins earlier. This one's already configured to go to www.lab.purvey.com. This is the whole thing, right? It just gives you a drop-down bucket, drop-down option. So if I go delete and I go www.lab.purvey.com, it's basically saying serve up content from that S3 bucket. Then we're moving one more step up the chain. We're going to go to Route 53. I've got 2 hosted zones. Lab.purvey.com is the subdomain that I've delegated out to Route 53. So I've created a bunch of fictitious stuff in here for my CloudJack script that I wrote just to see if it would catch decoupling and whatnot. But you'll see that we have right here www.lab.purvey.com, and we're pointing it to this target over here. And this was a question that you had, correct? So these are all the different ones. I've got a couple ELVs stood up in here, but we're going to point it to this CloudFront distribution, which we just configured to serve up content from that S3 bucket. Good, good. Okay. And if we go to, come on demo guys, www.lab.purvey.com, we get the hello world as expected, right? Okay, so I don't know if I want to do the S3 one today or not because that might work against me. But let's start with the CloudFront one first, and if all things go well, we can back up and try to do the S3 as well. Okay, so we've got Route 53 configured to point to CloudFront. We've got CloudFront configured to point to S3. I'm going to go in CloudFront now. I'm going to say on here, this distribution. We've got www.lab.purvey.com set as a CNAME. I'm going to go in there and be like, you know, we're not going to sell birdseed anymore. Don't need it. Boom. Oh wow, this is a cool new feature. When I initially did this, it didn't say anything about this. So this is really cool. They've added this in. Take note of that. That's a new feature. AWS is basically warning you that, hey, you're about to decouple your CloudFront from Route 53. That's good on AWS that they're taking proactive measures on that. So, all right. So this account, as you've seen, is all in my Purvey account. So I'm going to switch over here to the other way. This is my personal. I'm going to go in CloudFront on my personal account. I'm the attacker. And I've already created the distribution. basically I'm going to go in, simple as this, and I'm going to take www.lab.privade.com, register as a CNAME with my distribution. Okay? So you'll see this distribution status is in progress, which basically means it's pushing that CNAME and DNS and content out to the edges. Again, hopefully demo gods are in a favorable mood today, but if we go back to www.lab.privade.com, it now says hack the planet, which left a small step out, but we basically set up an index HTML file in our own S3 bucket that serves up hack the planet rather than hello world, right? Let me see if we can get the, did that make sense, the S3? Okay, because I kind of skipped over that for brevity. We've only got like 10 minutes left, but.
In your company CloudFront, you deleted your CNAME.
Correct.
But in the Route 53, it's still pointing back.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You got it. So what I'm going to go in here and do now, and this is the part that probably, unfortunately, is going to take some time. Back to my company account here. If I go into www.lab.privade.com, well, first of all, let me show you this. If I go on my personal account, to S3, and I say create new bucket, www.lab.privade.com, it's going to give me an error. Bucket name already exists. Same thing will happen for CloudFront if I try to do it from my personal account for something else that's already registered. So what I'm going to attempt to do, back to my company account, delete this bucket. Yes, I want to delete it. Confirm. Now this is the part that takes a little time. Amazon's doing whatever it does to scrub the data and delete it securely, I guess. Back to my personal. I try to create that bucket now. It teases you. It walks you through this whole thing, and then at the last moment, you get an error. And again, it's just in the process of deleting that. You know, once that is completed, and again, it's in my test, it's been everything from like 30 minutes to 2 hours. I don't know if it's the amount of data that varies or what, but it's only one file, and it for some reasons it's varied for me. At any rate, if I were to create that bucket that my company's CloudFront still points to as its origin, content origin, I could then serve up content in a similar manner as I would through CloudFront. Does that make sense? It's a little confusing. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So that's it. You know, the demo is really simple. It's kind of just to kind of get the gears grinding on things you could do with something like this. Simple hello world, hack the planet, but it demonstrates that just through a simple misconfiguration of CloudFront or S3 and Route 53, something like this could happen. So again, good housekeeping. What else can we do? Again, CloudJack is the script. Oh, that's one other thing I want to show you. Is that fine? Cool. So I don't know if you can see that or not. I need to load up a little bit more. So I've got a CloudJack Pi script, and basically right now it takes two parameters. Output format, I've got a text output or a JSON output, depending on what format you want. The text output, I need to work a little bit on the formatting to make it a little bit more aesthetic, but the profile is probably the important one. The AWS credentials file, you have to have pre-populated with your access key ID and secret access key. If you don't have that set up, you're not going to be able to access AWS anyway. So get that configured. And if you need to use a different profile than default, which this defaults to default, then you can specify that with the P argument. So for purposes of simplicity, I'm going to put output JSON P default, and there's the ASCII art I was talking about, and that will go through the my company's Route 53 and CloudFront. Remember, I had those fictitious CNAMEs earlier. That's why. It's going to give you, you know, a pass-fail status. So right now, the www.lab.pervade.com right there. I don't know if you guys can see that or not, but it's telling you that's failed. It's pointing to, it's showing you the distribution name, the target, the zone ID, everything you would really need to determine what sort of risk it presents, and it's telling you it fails. Some of the other ones, for instance, I've got real ones set up, I thought. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I don't have any like legitimate ones set up. This would have said pass before we deleted it. Let's just settle for that. But yeah, you can download that on GitHub. Again, it's github.com, Pervade, CloudJack. That's it. I would love pull requests because I just don't have the bandwidth to tinker with this as much as I'd like to. So if you guys want to go in, I got a little wish list here. It's SS3 CloudFront decoupling and then offensive reconnaissance and exploitation features. So that's it. Thanks again for your time. I'm open for any questions now or afterwards.
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to give you your challenge coin.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
2018.
Awesome. Thanks.
VIP.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I think we have some time for a few questions if anybody wants to ask any questions. No? Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Sure. Thank you.
And it's back on your day, so have a great day.